leave a comment. Both apps are free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, also on all smart TVs. 2016 forward. Now, newsflash. Joining me, I guess, is Eduardo. Okay, well, I guess Eduardo's busy, and I will carry this one on my own then. If that's what has to happen, that's what has to happen. All right, so Aaron's not here. Correct, Aaron? You're not here. So that silence means he's not. Okay, so when we talk about what's going on in the world today, and as far as news is concerned, the biggest thing that concerns me is our relationship with the United States, being Canada. If you noticed, when the new agreement was put together for Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., the new free trade agreement, you'll notice that the Mexican president and the American president had like books with signatures on them, and they were holding them saying, see, this is what we got. I don't know if any of you noticed. I sure know that the media sure didn't mention it. I guess it was for whatever reason. Our prime minister, the prime minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, didn't have one of those signed agreements. He was just holding a pen in his hand. From that moment on, I got this impression that I don't think Trump forgot what happened back in that big international meeting where Trudeau was with the British Prime Minister, the French President. I think it was somebody else. I don't remember who exactly, but they were overheard by TV cameras, the audio from TV cameras, that they were in fact, saying things not so complimentary about Trump. In fact, jaw-dropping was part of it. Now Trudeau doesn't go there. Now, to me, that doesn't look good. And as a Canadian, I'd like to know that our Canadian Prime Minister is getting along with the US President, and of course, the Mexican President as well. So he cited that conflicting events prohibited him from going there. That agreement is pretty important. That agreement is a North American agreement in a time when regions are getting together. The North American agreement, going back a few years now, was made after the European Union existed. It got to the point where everybody was basically pairing up, and Canada needed to pair up with the United States. And they did. But it seems in this round of negotiations, I think everybody's happy with they got what they needed. Who gets what they wanted when they sign on to an agreement and have a negotiation? So basically, Trudeau's not going there. That's the picture I remember, with him not being able to show his copy of the agreement. I find that troubling, to say the least. So that puts us in the awkward position now. Is there a behind the scenes battle going on between our Canadian leader and the US leader? Some suggested in Mexico that their president not go to the US because it was a photo op opportunity to basically, in these tough times, show some support for the president of the United States, who could use some friends around him at this time. So goodness knows what reaction that'll cause. I am happy to report, and this is a sports thing because we do sports. I'm happy to report that today will be the first time that there'll be a live game with a Toronto team involved. Well, the next couple of days, I shouldn't say. The league is starting. That is MLS. The coronavirus is something that the picture's becoming abundantly clear now that we have to make a decision. And our leaders are making a decision as to how do we get back to business? How do we reopen the economy? At what rate do we open it? everybody can see all the different ways that it's being handled. And the good news is, because it's being handled in different ways in different places, we can come up with a great idea, I think. And I think Canada's done pretty well. The one thing that's for sure that we can be happy about here in Canada, and my American friends, I'm not beating you over the head with this, is our different levels of government at least don't appear to be fighting in public. They appear to be working together. They're not working in cross purposes. So what this means is Canada has flattened the curve. And the new word is flattening the curve just basically means going this way instead of this way. The thing is, though, the flattening of the curve, the true meaning is it has to be at the bottom, as close to zero people with coronavirus, as close as possible. Very few new cases. And that's the true flattening of the curve. In the United States, what they're hoping to do is to flatten the curve at an unacceptably high level, causing, of course, hospitals everywhere and ICUs to be, well, to put it bluntly, unavailable for everyone, where there are no more people to be taken care of. And the news flash here is that it's now going to be a situation where people who need to be taken care of who don't have coronavirus will not be taken care of. And then they could end up in dire need of some ICU help and some truly important care from doctors and nurses in hospitals, but there is no room for them. And the sad thing that has been said is that people could end up dying at home. That's something that, as one human being to another human being, it truly is unfathomable. And it's something that I don't think anyone should be forced to live through, but we are. It's basically how we exist. The big thing now that's being discussed, and this is sports, but when we discuss sports, and when Elizabeth's on after this, we're going to talk about gymnastics on Sports Wrap. So I will take some of the sports conversation that's going on that's really more news oriented than sports, to be honest. What's happening in sports right now is we're starting to question the names of sports teams. Here in Canada, folks, you have your issues in the United States. For us, the big one here is, of course, the Edmonton Eskimos, a CFL team. The Edmonton Eskimos just put out a release today. This very day, they put out a release basically saying they're in conversation with the Inuit people. They're listening to what they have to say. They're listening to their partners. They're listening to everybody involved and trying to arrive at a conclusion that's acceptable for everyone. That acceptability, whichever way it ends up, on one side, if the name gets changed, the people who love that team and associate that name not with a slur on Inuit people, but on the name of the team. That's what makes it so hard for the Edmonton Eskimos to do something that will be acceptable to their fans. Because ultimately, in this time when we have to be sensitive to other people's feelings, some suggest more than we should. Some suggest not enough. I suggest that it needs to be considered, and that consideration is going on now. And I saw a post that basically said, don't be surprised if the next time you refer to the Edmonton football team in the Canadian Football League, it won't be the Eskimos. I say this to those of you who are extremely brokenhearted with the thought of that because you hold no malice. Your Eskimo team, the Esks, they mean a lot to the people in Edmonton. They've always been an Edmonton that is community owned fiscally, in other words, financially, always handled. This one's going to be a little bit difficult for and the reason simply is because someone's not going to just suggest be happy, because right now everybody's looking for something to tear down that sounds or smells like racism, even when it isn't. I cite the example of the Chicago Blackhawks. The Blackhawks refer to a Native American tribe. The Indian Head, as far as, and I want to hear from the Blackhawks or from Aboriginal people who relate to that exact team, who directly relate to that. I'd like to hear if they have any problem with the way they've been shown to be, the way the Blackhawks, the Chicago Blackhawks, have treated that logo, what that logo represents. And as far as I know, if you have a team in baseball called the Senators, is that a problem? It can be, if they make fun of senators, if they create a mascot that disrespects senators, be the same thing. So if the Blackhawks have a mascot, or they do anything that disrespects those Aboriginal people, and I'd like to hope, because the Chicago Blackhawk uniform and that logo is one of the favorites of all hockey fans. It truly is. It's one of the most praised jerseys, uniforms. So when I hear from people who don't like the idea of the Eskimos name being changed, they start bringing in all these other teams. I got a message right away about the Red Blacks. Oh no, we're going to have to change that. Or the Argonauts. Are the Argonauts an offense to Greek culture? Well, I've gone to the games, and again, I'll have to submit to my Greek friend's opinion. Mine, while it matters, doesn't matter primarily. So if we're looking at team names, team logos, the way teams reflect the name or project the name that they pick in its truest sense, in a kind way, in a proud way, in a way that brings forth pride and doesn't demean, insult, put down. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about just because you use a name called the Blackhawks, the Chicago Blackhawks, that doesn't make it discriminatory. That doesn't make it something that we need to tear down. Is the Blackhawk head that you see with the war paint, is it because they have war paint on? Does that mean now that this is an angry version of the Blackhawk Indians? That's what this is going to come down to, folks. And if common sense prevails, it's about how the people who are being reflected by the franchise feel. I suspect with a lot of certainty that there are a lot of Aboriginal people that don't like being referred to as Redskins. Can you not understand that? The people who message me and say, what's the big deal? Can you not understand that when you call somebody a Redskin, when you refer to Redskin, it's going to become the N-word. Maybe I shouldn't even be saying it, come to think of it. And maybe I'll stop. And I think I should. But this is what happens. We don't know how we offend until the people who are offended are given a voice. Well, they've been given a voice. And now that voice has been heard by minority partners who want to sell their part of the team, by sponsors, the main naming sponsor. On that hand, that is the extreme, because folks, the name of that team is insulting and it is demeaning. It's something that no one should be forced to put up with. All right? That is simple. Being a Blackhawk, an Eskimo is somewhere down the middle, or is it closer to the Washington nickname? Those are the questions that we have to ask the people who are directly affected. The thing I don't like more than anything, which totally infuriates me, really does. This is the part that infuriates me. When people tell other people what should offend them. I don't have a right to tell people what they should be offended by. I don't have the right to determine what is offensive to Black people, Asian people, Puerto Rican people. I can discuss what it's like as an Italian to have grown up in this country in Canada, called names which I can use, and I'll use it once. There's a W word. You know what the word is. They called us DPs. As a young boy, because we hung out at a coffee shop and drank coffee, I was about between 8 and 10 years old. I told you this before. I was nightsticked by a police officer who didn't want us standing around, didn't want my dad and his friends standing around having a coffee and talking about a soccer game they just saw at Earl Score Park. I can speak to that. I can speak to racism in that direction. I can speak to it because it's affected me. And guess what? Because it affected me, it causes me to feel and be more emotional on behalf of other people. Once you've been discriminated against, and here's the scary part, folks, what's going on in the United States today, when a police officer strangles a man to death, knows that he's doing something wrong, refuses to stop, another officer shoots a Black man in the back. This isn't about making Black people more powerful. This is about stopping the things that happen that kill people for very little reason. So when I saw that, I had a tough week. I told my producer, I told the guy that runs this station, I was having a really tough couple of weeks because that experience as a child came to the forefront. Because we were attacked that day, somebody started a rumor that my father, the president of that soccer club, beat up a police officer. A police officer was beat up in an alley. I want you to understand why this is so personal to me. Do you know what? My father didn't do it. My father was working at the Royal Canadian Yacht Club, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant place. And they said, no, he was working here. It's impossible that he could have done that at that time. Here's what I'm going to tell you that I infer as an Italian man, grew up, born in this country, raised by an Italian family. What I can tell you that I can understand a little bit and why what was going on in the United States started to affect me. I began to realize why I was afraid of the police growing up. I began to realize why I became very defensive about certain things. I also began to understand that there was a side of bitterness with my father in this country, about this country, because he was charged for something just because someone said he did it. Someone that had no proof that he did it. Obviously, someone who had no reason to suggest that he did it. He was working at the Royal Canadian Yacht Club. Think about that. And so when I see what happens in the United States, when I see discrimination, it makes me ill. It really does. And until you've been discriminated against, until you've been made to feel like a second-class citizen, you'll never understand what the Black community is going through. You'll never understand what the Aboriginal community is going through. You can't understand it because it's something that literally worms its way inside your brain without you even realizing the effect it causes. You don't realize how it affects you. So when you see the news and you see a young Black boy A young black kid playing basketball, sees a police car, hides behind his father's minivan. His father sees it on videotape. Then you'll begin to understand why racism is so pervasive, because it's hard to prove that people are racist. It's hard to prove that you've been discriminated against. And when you don't feel like you have an equal footing in the legal system, you don't want to be involved in the legal system. So when you turn around and run because a police officer is trying to handcuff you because you're in a parked car drunk, or you had too much to drink, or you failed a breathalyzer, and you run, that's a crime. That's avoiding arrest. But it doesn't mean you should get shot in the back. And that's why this kind of stuff and why this show was important to me, because it gives me an opportunity to share with you some of my issues that I think relate to what's going on in the world. I really do think it's going on in the world. So the other thing is, and this is important, I said it once and I want to say it again, we can't let people tell other people what should offend them or what should hurt them or how they're being hurt. Soon as we do that, we have people involved with an agenda, and the people with an agenda are driving it. They don't care about the people who are actually suffering. They're using them. When a person, something bad happens to a person, and that person understands the context of everything that surrounded what happened, and somebody says, but you know what? I know what you're going through. I know what they did to you, even though they didn't do it to them. It's just convenient to be able to run somebody through a process that they don't want any part of. So here's my final comment on this subject. What we need to concern ourselves with in life, what we really need to concern ourselves with in life, is making ourselves content and happy, making sure that you, I, those around us are treated equally based on who we are today. It matters who we were yesterday, absolutely. It matters what society was like yesterday. It's important to recognize the mistakes of society in the past, the sins of the past, the horrific things that were done in the past. Punishment should be sought against people who did things that we know are wrong and should never have been done. But all I ask is for context. There should also be context. You can't fine people for not wearing a seatbelt in 1960. While what they did was stupid by not wearing a seatbelt. Oh, by the way, they weren't in the car anyway. But I think you get my point. Rules change. And all we are required to do as human beings in a democratic society is to abide by the rules. If people abide by the rules and run astray of common sense or decency, they should be held to account. There's no doubt about that. So the Edmonton Eskimos name changes. A new name will come up. For those of you that are hurt and distraught by that, please understand why it happens and why it is going to happen. The Washington NFL team, please try to understand why that needs to happen, because they're symbols. They're symbols of what's, if you don't get why symbols are certain, flag is going down easy. Because what it represents is still something that many people And that's society, as we refer to it here in Canada. In the US, do you have a right to pursue your happiness? And being happy has a lot to do with not being torn down, not being mistreated, not being abused, not being made fun of, not being marginalized. So, Eduardo, I understand you were busy. I hope I did a good enough job to pass this half hour the way I didn't realize we were going to do it. But I truly appreciate the opportunity, BarnBurner.ca, for giving me the opportunity to share my opinions with you, which I feel, I truly believe, are important. And for those of us that understand activism in a positive way, is a wonderful thing. But it always should lead to a positive result. Tearing down for tearing down's sake is wrong. And that's something I hope we can understand and change. There's the left, there's the right. You'll never get the extremes to agree. On that note, thank you for watching Newsflash. This show can also be heard on the BarnBurner Radio Network on its 122 platforms. Please check out BarnBurner.ca for all the news. BarnBurner, watch it, hear it, read it, download it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Up next, Sports Wrap when we come back after this.